that what we were doing was just another way to love.
Nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, one, zero.
Good evening, all. I am Dustin, and welcome to the Dominance Dialogues. This is the podcast where we explore the psychology, the sociology, and the cultural aspects of BDSM and adult relationships. And in tonight's episode, Preserving Kink History inside of the Carter Johnson Library, we're excited to welcome MamaVi. MamaVi, welcome. Would you mind introducing yourself and a little bit about your experience?
Hi, I'm Vi Johnson. I have been called many things from mom, Mama Vi, to grandmom, to great grand, and now GG. I love that. And 3G, which tells you how old I am. Um, my partner of 51 years, this January 1st, and I have been kicking around this wonderful thing that we do, whether you call it leather, kink, fun, life, or lifestyle, for just about 50 and a half years. Um, the bio itself is long and way too detailed. The only three important things are the library that I chose to found, which we'll be talking about tonight. The fact that Jill and I are two of the eight original onyx pearls, and that the community that I have loved and dedicated my life to has honored me in ways I can't even begin to consider. Those are the three things that are the most important.
They're pretty monumental things, if you ask me.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, and I think that I'd like to hold a little bit of space and congratulate you on a 51-year relationship that is, hmm, the word I want to say is effort. I don't know if I necessarily like it, but that's the word
It's,
I'll use for now.
it's accurate. Relationships take work on both sides.
Hmm.
Life gives us bumps and bruises, Dustin. It's supposed to. That's the nature of growth. Um, the trick is getting over it, talking about it, sharing it, finding the best, fixing the worst, and rolling right along.
Mm. I think that you hit on like the key word that I'm going to pull out of that statement was fix. I'm 40 years old. I just turned 40 a few months ago. And I come from Sicilian descent, so my culture is a little different. Was very raised waste not, want not. Used to rinse out Ziploc bags. 40 years
Still
later,
do.
now I kind of do the same thing. Weird. Um, but I fix everything or almost everything, and almost everything, and I'm choosing my words wisely, almost everything is fixable. I think I'm just gonna throw my generation under the bus a little bit. We've We're raised a little bit in consumerism, and part of consumerism is d- like I don't know if it's the word, but disposanism, right? Where
Oh, very true.
every 2 to 3 years we get a new phone, a new car, a new house at this point, or a new apartment. Logically, it almost makes sense we only get a new spouse or a new partner or a new relationship or so on and so forth. Or maybe. Not to me. Nonetheless, I appreciate you bringing attention that 51 years takes some effort and it takes some fixing.
And my partner, Jill Carter, the Carter in Carter Johnson, was the first Black international Ms. Leather. And we got together when I was in graduate school and she was in college. And we were each other's first, by the way. We were both engaged to the men in our lives and fell in love, which adds to that gasoline soaked handbasket we thought we were going to hell in. And I love her more now than I did the day I said I did. And that was half a
Mm.
century ago.
That's that's touching. I mean, before we even got on camera, our early access got to like just step into what they probably thought was the conversation because I was wiping off tears off of my face as we were having this heartfelt conversation about connection and self-acceptance. But before I just get completely lost and just enjoying the conversation with you, I would like to stay on topic a little bit, and I've been trying to be a little bit more mindful with that. And this
Understood.
episode is about you and the Carter Johnson Library. So my first question for you is what inspired the creation of the Carter Johnson Library?
You know, I be prepared. One, you have a storyteller, and two, I am naturally long winded. So I'm going to try and make this story much shorter. When I was a kid, the local library had a librarian who was just delightful. She let us hang out, play our transistor radio, which should tell you how old I am. Don't be loud. She let us have lunch in the library as long as we didn't make a mess. And it was a safe place. It was a place where we laughed, where we learned, where we hung out, where we read. It was safe. Went off to college. Mom called me and she said, "Stop by the library before you come home." I went. I was an undergraduate at college in New Jersey, And I did. And there was a huge scorch mark on the side wall of the library. There had been a book burning there because some members of the town took offense to Huck Finn. So they took the book out and burned it on the steps of the library. It affected me in ways that still affect me today. Now, I grew up with a huge library in my home. My mother read everything she could get her hands on and kept most of it. So books are sacred to me. You don't burn books. You just don't. You may not agree with them. Most of the time, you won't. You don't burn them. The evidence of the mistake gets destroyed in the flames. So you cannot learn because the past is now gone. Will fade out. That was the personal side. Um, about 30, good God, about 30 years ago, I started doing a presentation for the tribe called the Leather History Show and Tell. A book went up in this newly created thing called eBay. And I wanted the book because, for a lot of different reasons, I had a very fast button because the town I lived in was wired for high speed internet. And I sniped the other bidder for the book and I won it and I was tickled about it. And this was back in the day when people on eBay could still talk to each other. You can't now. And as I was talking to the man that I sniped for the book, thinking he was a collector who could help me find other books I could afford to show my tribe, he thought I was what he was. And he was being paid by the Christian right to find what they did not agree with and burn it. Zero to
Mhm.
pissed off Dustin in ways you cannot believe. About the third step in that, about 6 weeks later, I was down at an event called Southeast Leatherfest. And a young man came up to me, asked if he could talk to me. Sure. We sat down in the lobby, and he proceeded to tell me that there had been a book burning in front of his store, and he was afraid for his clients and should he shut down. Talked him out of it. We spent about an hour talking, went upstairs to my hotel room and had a screaming match with God. And I swore that day, if I had to beg it, borrow it, buy it, steal it, I didn't care. You do
Mm.
not get to burn my kids' history. Period. I am eternally grateful that my spouse agrees with me because creating this library has been everything we had. And even more grateful, Dustin, that my extended family also agrees with me and has carried the torch forward. There are 11 annexes to this library, soon to be 13 this year. Um, Proof of who you are is between the pages of a book of books, good or bad. I'm not talking truth, I'm talking fact. My job is to save it and let you draw your own conclusions, to show you how to think, not teach you what to think. And if
Mm.
the evidence of that is destroyed, how would Dustin have found out that there are groups that could help him if you hadn't found it in the written word somewhere?
Mm. You're trying to get me in the feels. Um,
It is emotional. It still is for me, Dustin. It still is because you said I could say what I want. You don't fuck with my family. You don't fuck with the great grandchildren I don't even know I have yet. You don't get to destroy the proof that they have always existed and then convince
mm.
them that they're sewer rats or gutter trash because if they were anything better, there would be evidence. I have the evidence. It really is just that simple.
So powerful. So powerful. I I don't get lost for words, but I'm getting a little emotional, just humbled by all of this. You know, thinking about if it wasn't for efforts like you or various other members of our community that came before me, where would I be? It's
The
not.
same thing for Jill and me. Where would we be?
Mm,
You're not an exception to that rule. Each generation, kink, I'm going to talk about specifically, each kink generation comes out thinking they're the only one.
mm.
And therefore, there must be something wrong with them. It's until you realize that not only are you not alone, you never have been, that the breath goes out, the relaxation happens, and the self awareness begins. Oh my God, there are more like me. I may never meet them, but there are more out there. And that realization is powerful, Dustin. It's powerful. It keeps you from believing poison.
Uh, I don't think I gave you my disclaimer. When I look down, I'm trying to frantically take notes. I'm not looking at my phone or trying to be disrespectful. There is
You
just
say go back.
so there's so much good stuff here. And something for me as an intellect, I like words, I like proper use of words, usually. Um, and I rarely like constants, meaning always or never, because in my opinion, they're rarely true. But you just said a constant, and I'm thankful for you saying it, and I'm gonna bring attention to it because 20 years into my journey, I apparently needed to hear it again that I'm not alone, and I never have been.
Never.
The, the power in those words. I think a lot of us as humans seek connection, seek similarity, and I have no idea what your sex education was like, but my sex education in the 90s was don't have sex, otherwise you're going to get a girl pregnant or your genitalia is going to fall off. And I'm trying to be very respectful here, right? And that was about it. Thankfully, my mom was very sex positive and it was awkward, but nonetheless, a lot of my desires, they fit nowhere in any external influence that I had up until that time. I was raised in dogmatic religion. I was supposed to get a girlfriend, go on 3.5 dates, get a dog, buy a house, marry her, have 3 kids, or whatever the linear path was. Like, there was no kinky sex, or very simply put by you, fun, right? It was very structured relationship type of a deal. And then, mm, I was raised to be a provider as a protector. There's like a overarching term in my philosophy, no women or children. It is my sworn duty as a man to protect women and children. And I will, whether it's my woman or whether it's my children. It's just whatever archaic belief that may be, it's my belief. And fundamentally thought there was something wrong with me as a man because this is something that was ingrained in me, like culturally, because I wanted to protect women, but at the same time, I wanted to put my hands on them in ways that society said I shouldn't necessarily. But because of conversations like this that I found at this point almost 20 years ago, it brought that level of self-acceptance.
Let me run that religious gamut just down two small alleyways. First one says, well, we get to be controversial. The first one says, be fruitful and multiply. Uh, and it says, make ye a joyful noise unto the Lord. There's a difference just in between happiness and joy. If I want to talk about joyful, which has nothing to do with circumstance, the two, or what is formulated to happen, then the two most joyful sounds that you can give to the Lord are the borning cry of a baby. The first sound it makes coming out. It
Mm,
shouts for joy. The second one is the sound you make at orgasm.
hmm,
They're the only two joyful noises you can make. So if you are to make a joyful noise, you're going to have sex to do it.
hmm.
Now, in terms of protection, a number of religions, faiths, talk about the protection of women, but they tend to forget why. Woman is protected not because she is weak, but because she is life bearer. So the
Yes.
ability to carry that on must be protected. And her strength has nothing to do with it, for God's sakes. If I can pass the watermelon through the eye of a needle, I am not weak. The other is having to do with the fruit of that, which also must be protected until it
Mm,
reaches its ripeness, and that's a child.
mm.
If the child is not protected, it does not grow into its full potential and therefore cannot make its own joyful noise.
I don't remember exactly how it was framed to me in youth. It was something along the lines of the tribe that the reason why the men go out and hunt is because if you send out 10 of them and only one comes back, the tribe continues. If you send out your 10 women, assuming there's only 10 women in the tribe and one comes back, you're going to
Mhm.
have some serious issues continuing that tribe, continuing the life force. And the same with
Things like
children. But this is kind of way off the topic. So, as
hold
much
on,
as I
let me
want to,
throw one more. Let me throw one more at you. Just one more.
okay, one more.
Okay, if your job is to be fruitful and multiply and have fun and do it, you're going to have fun because if you don't, you probably won't ovulate. And if having that fun with all of the consent that couples give
Mhm.
looks a little different than somebody else having fun, who cares?
I'm not worthy.
The differences are ages, my darling. I see through the things through the eyes of old and decapitated and
Mhm.
proud.
No, I love that. I love it. And I think that I'll finalize my thoughts with this is like, for me as a human, outside of these conversations, I carried a lot of self-judgment, a lot of self-shame. Just going back to your statement, I thought I was alone. I thought that nobody else had these different desires. So I think to carry on with the conversation, my next question is, can you describe the library's mission and its significance to the kink community? We touched on it, but I have a feeling you have just a touch more to say.
Um, it has expanded. The original mission, and it is still part of its ongoing mission, is to make history something that is alive and vibrant. Again, looking back in my childhood, I had a history teacher who made the class realize history was a lot more than just names and dates to be memorized. History was 1,000 people whose lives intersected at one point to do something that in the moment was just the right thing to do. They weren't trying to make history. The example I give when I was still teaching history is I got a dozen men sitting in a tavern with a pint bitching about their wives and their taxes. Would be today. Now, did those dozen men who were bitching about their wives and their taxes, and let's add one, their king, not their president, realize that that bitching would make a new country? No, they just did what they thought was right. We
Mm,
from the future look back at the past and decide what's important and what's not. But if you do not understand, historians and people who have made history are us. That's all. They are not superheroes. They don't don capes. They don't walk on water. They pass it. Um, they're just the right people in the right place at the right time to
mm,
do something that the future considers valuable. But I say all of that to say most people who have gone through first through 12 and have looked at history have been bored to tears because to them all it is names and dates. They don't think about um, the magazines or the books or what somebody was thinking when they had their first reaffirming visual in a magazine and what it inspired them to do, or the fact that we ordinary people do extraordinary things. But the
mm,
only way to really touch that is to put your hands on history, especially your own history. And if I couldn't get people past the names and dates part for it to be real and to show the generation that came right after the leather generation that came right after mine that history was real, maybe I could take it around and show it to them, which is what started me down this path because I love history and I wanted people to love it too, but know that it wasn't John Adams and George Washington. It
mm,
was Patrick Califia or Jack Jackson, people who are cornerstones of what this tribe does. And they're not superhuman.
mm,
They're on Facebook and FetLife, and you can reach out and ask them about their accomplishments, which are now part of this tribe's history. I wanted it to be real. I wanted the people that two leather generations after me are looking up with wide eyed veneration to know they're human. Hi, here's their story. But more importantly, they didn't know they were making history, and neither do you.
mm.
That's for the future to decide. But if I can teach you about the importance of your own past, you'll save it so that the future can decide. How's that for a long winded answer?
Wow. I I'm gonna have to take like a couple weeks off after this conversation. I'm not sure.
It was
Wow.
long winded.
No, I mean, there's some great things that came from that. So many, but one of the biggest ones that I want to pull out of it is the future gets to decide what's important, right? And these are my words, paraphrasing your words to be clear, but that is so monumental to think about when I think about some of the great minds of the past. They were just ordinary people, as you stated, that happened to do extraordinary things. And any one of us is capable of it. Mama Vi, I'm gonna build up your podium for a moment. 50 years ago, do you think you would have received all the honor and respect and accolades that the community has given you? How you can walk into certain places and people will just beg for your attention.
If I could do a third of what this community thinks I can do, I could walk on water instead of just passing it. But there are. Let me back up. Feet. And remember, there are three of those crazy women, and they have a wicked sense of humor collectively. Fate has put Jill and me in the right place at the right time to bear witness, to be disciples to some of the most amazing events and people in the 55 years, and we were part of 50 of it, of this out generation, the first out leather generation's history. When you have been privileged to see it, you have an obligation to tell it.
Hmm.
And when you have 50 years of history, you tend to raise, mother, or touch an awful lot of people, especially when this tribe was much smaller. So, in simply bearing witness, whether it be the preservation of a program or the old magazines or the newsletter when a friend did something that is now looked on as historic. All I did was save it. That's all. To be able to tell stories about it. But in telling the story, I didn't realize Jill and I, more Ivan, because Jill was the force behind me, was playing a game of connect the dots. It was normal for my kinkling childhood. That is not normal now. So I'm being thanked by a lot of leather generations after me for simply doing what was done for me, or paying
Mm.
back that debt as it was given to me without realizing that actually that's not accurate. Without thinking about the block of time that had been snatched from this community because of AIDS.
Mm.
We lost the generation that immediately followed me, the leather generation, who would have carried this on without a break. So, in putting those pieces back in, my tribe, my community, with all of its great clans of kink and fetish and leather, are now saying thank you with these wonderful accolades for which I am incredibly humble. For me, this is what was given to me. I'm supposed to pass this on. The greatest thanks I get is in having these conversations to pass on these stories. Um, the trophy case is full of glass that is incredibly humbling. But whether it's there or whether it isn't, doesn't stop the charge, the mantle, pass it forward.
Mm. Oh my God, absolutely. Just, I'm doing everything I can to contain myself, emotion wise. I mean, off the air, part of our conversation before we open it up to early access was that, and I've talked about it fairly openly on the podcast and other public means, that I struggled to accept myself as a Dustin, let alone a dominant. I didn't really have that terminology. Part of me just thought I liked to be an asshole to the people that I love. And that's really what it boils down to. The more I care about you, the meaner I want to be to you. I have it took me a really long time to figure it out, but I have little to no desire to be mean to somebody I don't know, even if they're mean to me. Like, I don't know why, but they could be mean to me, crude to me, cut me off in traffic, flip me off, and I'm just like, ah, they're probably having a bad day. Whatever. Go about my day. Somebody treats me really good. I start to care for them, all the things. Now I kind of want to watch them suffer for some reason. Nonetheless, here I am now, 20 years later. But I can joke about it, but there was genuinely a time where I was in a really dark space where I thought that I was somehow less than a human. Yeah, I'm gonna contain my thoughts. I think the next question I want to go to is what challenges have you faced in preserving BDSM and leather history?
As funny as it sounds, biggest challenge is getting it.
Mm,
Not because it isn't out there, but because only I believe, my opinion only, in the last 7 to 10 years of this holy crusade that the leather ancestors have me on, have people begun to realize value, the value of the story of uh Guy Baldwin, when not everybody knows Guy, but what was it like to carry two international titles at once? He did. He was both IML and Mr. NLA.
mm,
That's an interesting story unto itself. The coming out stories we don't think about. Like, what did it feel like the first time you put on a piece of leather? What was going through your mind? That's an important coming out story. It's also a very valuable one. Nobody thinks about it because the standard response is, well, it's just my story. The truth is, when people come to the library or any of the annexes, what you're sitting in is 80% of Jill's and my old stuff. And now, as the community is giving more to both the library and Big Brother in Chicago, they're beginning to think of the value of their own history, of their own story. Yes, it is yours. But in sharing something that is so minor, you would never think twice about it. For someone else, you could change a life.
mm,
Your story, as my kinklings in Oklahoma pounded into Jill's in my head, our old stuff was their history. And that was an interesting revelation because for us, we just saved it originally so that we had a record of what we did or where we went or what we had read. It was our kinklings who were constantly going through our boxes of old stuff and pulling things out and asking questions about, well, you went to this event. What was it like? Or you know the person who just won this title, and so on. They learned from our experience.
mm,
That experience allowed them to go and do other things. When they look back, that simple conversation for them is historic. Remember, history is judged by the future, not by the present.
mm,
So, how do I convince people that what they're doing, what they're reading, what they're creating is the history of tomorrow? How do I explain to some young Leatherman who, in the real world, in the muggle world, whatever you might want to call it, um, designs airplane parts, that the patent that he holds on that part is part of leather history. Well, it's got nothing to do with leather. Yeah, it does. You're a Leatherman. You hold a patent on something. That is your contribution to the world. Therefore, it's history, and I want it. And so, coming back to where we began this, remember, I warned you I was long winded. Um, the greatest obstacle is in getting people to realize the value of their own story. I would like to think that 25 years of proselytizing has finally paid off. That 25 plus years of traveling with the evidence of the path that's been walked before them has finally taken hold, literally in an entirely new chronologic generation. If a generation is 20 to 22 years, and I've been preaching at them for 25, hi, somewhere along the line, I convinced your parents that who they were was important and tell their babies about it.
Mm.
Now there is more value in the story just by evidence of how many publications about us are coming out. Not just the books, but also dissertations and theses and articles. The work is finally paying off and it's being shared.
That's amazing. I mean, it really is, and earlier in the conversation, I think that one of the things you said something along the lines of the evidence of the mistakes burns in the flames, and it really makes me think of like some of the books I have, like for instance, 1984, a fairly common book that was mandatory reading for me in college. I don't want to get into all the bureaucracy of it, but there's some bureaucracy around George Orwell and his books now. I'm thankful that I have my 1984 from 2003 when I purchased it. Nonetheless, it's interesting as someone that is a bibliophile that will probably own more books than I'll ever be able to read. I try. It's the college effort, right? Um, but I've talked about it. I don't really enjoy reading. I enjoy the value I get from reading. There is a massive gap. And there is a massive gap between the information that's delivered in a book versus the information that's delivered on social media or Google. One, barrier to entry. It is very hard to publish a book. Well, maybe not. If you have a lot of money, I guess you can probably make some things happen. It takes effort, intention. Where we live now, you can make a social media post in a few seconds. I cannot say how much I value my books. There are a few of them that I will continue to go back and read. Some are yearly. I mean, I just read a passage from Meditations to my girl. She never heard of Meditations. I'm like, Marcus Aurelius, Meditations? And I was like, this is how I read Meditations. And I just went and picked a meditation and read one. And there you go. But the value and the amount of knowledge in those pages far exceeds any bank account I'll ever have.
The wealth of the word,
Mm.
the lineage of the word. You know, when when I have young Leathermen here, especially when they sit in the Ware book room, and I hand them the oldest book I could afford to buy in the library is from 1701. And the reaction to holding a book that old without it being behind glass, no, I said, take the book out of the clamshell and hold it. The only way you are going to know and truly believe is if it's in your hands, not behind glass. But the idea that they can touch a piece of themselves that's that old. Written word, not something that will disappear. And one of my great fears about so much that's coming out with all of the social media. I have my own opinions on it because far too much of it is not accurate. And that's,
Mm.
I, in my humble opinion only. I understand opinions. They're like assholes. We all have one. I rather like fact first, truth second, opinion third. They should work together. But to hold on to the written word or to hold on to a picture of that word that is uncensored, like the images from the tomb of the flagellants in Italy, I believe. And those images go back to the 1200s. There's a woman bent between two men. What they're doing is obvious, and she's being paddled. Um, or the friezes around those beautiful little Greek plates that show the joy of sex. Hi,
Mm.
here is the evidence,
Yeah.
not the opinion, not the truth. The truth is subjective. Here is the fact. Draw your truth from it. Create your opinion from your truth. In that order.
I'm looking at time. We have about 40 minutes left for our questions, so I'm going to start to jump around a little bit more and prioritize.
Okay.
I think the next important question that makes sense to ask now is, can you share a story that illustrates the impact of the library has had on an individual or individuals?
Listen, there are so many.
Obviously respecting anonymity.
But I'm going because I never knew the name of this child. When we set up a library, normally there is one way in and one way out. We set up a library at an event 10 or 11 years ago called Floating World. And it was one of the few times the library had two doors. Doesn't usually happen that way. We don't have a problem, it just doesn't happen. I was standing near one with one of my young storytellers. We use the word griot. And at the other entrance, a little genderqueer walked in that I didn't even think was old enough to be at the event. Stood in the doorway like a deer in headlights, and then put their hand against the bookcase and walked around with this wide eyed look, with their hand just touching the books. The child pulled one out and sat down. What book they pulled out, I don't know to this day. Sat like this, rocking back and forth, and I could hear the child. I'm not alone, I'm not alone, I'm not alone, I'm not alone. It got repeated so often, I was literally afraid this child was going to have a psychotic break. I asked my youngest griot, because Jackie was only 23, so probably only a few years older than this child. There are times when you need your siblings, not your grandparents. Go and just be with them. Um, I watched probably from about 15 feet away, didn't want to intrude while they talked for well over an hour.
Hmm.
And Jackie brought over other books and put them down, and the kid never put this book down. Never put it down. Finally, it went from two hands to one hand while they looked at other books, but never put it down. I can still see that, and it's been almost 15 years. Watching that light bulb go on and the relief at the same time hit me like a 2x4 between the eyes.
Mm.
Another quicker story. When the library travels, there's a bookcase set up called Ziggy's Corner. It is take something, leave something. Because let's face it, what we do is expensive. All kinds of things have been left on Ziggy's Corner. Books, yes, but leather, food, coupons, um, good wishes, which are important because the value of what you take and the value of what you leave are immaterial. You just have to leave something of yourself. Getting that started was another one of those library lessons. It was a 2x4 for me because I watch kids come down and want something so badly and wouldn't take it until I damn near forced it into their hands. Why would you do? And the questions were, why would you do this for us? What do you want? What's the catch? What's the hook? Nobody gives anybody anything for free. Dustin, I admit to being old and an idealist, but that's what was given to us. What we do is expensive. The books are expensive. The magazines are expensive. The registrations are expensive. The leather is expensive. It's money, and our next generation doesn't have it. And when one of them told me that they had the choice of buying the book that they were given from Ziggy's Corner or eating for 3 days, that is not a choice our next generation should ever have to make. We, as the old dogs, have an obligation to see to it that you carry on what we've done. Ziggy's Corner taught me that I have an entire generation I had to change because some of us really do want you to succeed, not for what you can give us, but what you can give those that come after you.
Mm.
Another lesson from the library. There are 1,000 other stories like that, and you don't have that much time.
Not tonight, but who knows? Maybe we'll have to have another conversation.
Over a cup of coffee, when you come to the library and you are staying in the scholars' room,
Nice.
because one of in getting to live out my fantasy in this library, I got to create a room where scholars, and for me, if you are studying this tribe at all, you're a scholar, whether you're an artist, a composer, a poet, whatever. You can actually live in the library. We've had people there for up to a month at a time.
One more one
So
or
there's a
two.
fully functioning kitchen, a huge garden where you can sit outside and read or walk the labyrinth. But when you are staying in the library for a week and we come check on you and make sure you've eaten, over a cup of coffee in the morning, I will tell you a few of those stories.
In the permanent library, it's in Chicago area, correct?
Hmm, two different institutions. That's Big Brother. You were
Okay.
thinking of the Leather Archives and Museum. The Carter
Ah,
Johnson Library and Collection is in Evansville, Indiana. The easiest way to understand the difference is we are siblings, but the Leather Archive is our Smithsonian. The Carter Johnson is the Library of Congress.
mm.
Same end goal, different ways of getting there. They are a museum. We are a library. I want you to hold it, smell it, touch it, read it, jerk off over it. Yes, sex in the library is allowed and happens fairly frequently, not on the book. Um, to wonder who did it before you, to listen to your ancestral voices. That's what the library is. The library is an experience, actually, because you come, you stay, you read, you laugh, you listen to your ancestors' voices. You find a sunny day, you throw a blanket outside in the garden. You read by sunshine, or you come in at night, have a glass of wine in the rare books room, and fall asleep. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what the library was created for. And all of the annexes, because there are 11 of them, have the same feeling. People who have been in different annexes at different conferences all say the library feels different than every other conference room in the building. It's supposed to, your ancestors are there.
Mm. Well, Evansville is actually not that far from me. I think it's
I
maybe
know.
4 hours, give or take. Actually, I had to Google it. It's under 6. But that's a good thing because it's like fate knew if it's over 6, I fly. And I'm not joking. I have a boundary at 6 hours. I will only drive up to 6 hours. After that,
Mhm.
I fly. So you are within driving distance. So maybe we'll have to schedule a time for me to come out and visit. Maybe I can donate
Right
something to the
now,
library as well.
we guarantee that the scholars room is open and that there's nobody there that weekend. We meet you at the library, walk you around the library. It could be me or boy Robbie or Courtney or any of the library family. We walk you around the library, get you familiar with where everything is, get you to unpack, literally drop your stuff because it's designed to feel like home. If it doesn't, it's not a Carter Johnson. If you can't come in, kick off your shoes, drop your coat somewhere where you'll get it later, go to the fridge, grab a drink, and then go grab a book and flop down on the floor, you're not in the Carter Johnson. You drop your clothes in the rare books room. You drop your suitcase in the scholars room. You put on some music, grab some stuff, read some books. We laugh, we talk, we leave you
Mm.
so that you are sleeping in the library or not. A whole lot of people don't sleep. They have a bad tendency to read all night or broadcast from the library, which happens all the time. We check in on you with coffee. Coffee is very important. We bring you the cup of coffee the next morning. Uh, you feed yourself from the fridge because we try to provide some basics. And you rinse, wash, repeat for 2 or 3 days before you head home.
You are tempting me with a great time, Mama Vi. And I'm thinking about what am I doing next weekend? Yeah.
People televise from the library, they walk around, they talk about what they're experiencing and film that.
Mm.
They come back and bring more friends with them. When the weather gets really nice, like late March, early April, and things are just beginning to bloom, we have lots and lots of blankets and a few tray tables and lots of places to sit and read. And we encourage you to take a stack of books outside. Go
Mm.
be with Mother Nature and your ancestors.
Yeah. Yeah. We're gonna have to set up a date, most definitely. At least probably 2, maybe 12. I'm not sure yet, but we'll figure it out.
Well, if any of your patrons happen to be somewhere near Evansville, that's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, that is part of the goal of this is to get more exposure to you and yours and the library and not even just that, but also there might be somebody like we keep hitting at that is listening to this conversation and they need to know that they're not alone.
And
Oof.
that they're safe.
Absolutely. All right, so now since we're talking about like the books and you got me all just like trying to visualize what this library looks like, right? Can you share some of the most unique or perhaps surprising items in the library currently?
For now, I think the most unique would be the 1701. It's the oldest book I could afford. 1701 History of the Rod. We have also a lot of books, and we're looking for more from Verlag Press in Germany. This was the press company Hitler vowed to burn down or shut down. As it turned out, he burned it down. We're trying to find their original publications pre 1935 just to have them. Because Munich was a hotbed of sex, but also sexual knowledge.
Mm,
Some of the greatest books on human sexuality were coming out of Berlin. Now, the thing that surprises the most people is within the library garden. Yes, we have a pergola because we've had hand fastings there and weddings, but we also have a labyrinth there so that you can walk the labyrinth in meditation or should literally sit in the center of the labyrinth and read.
mm. Yeah, this is sounding like some oasis that I'm just gonna have to and come and visit. Huh. Um, wow. Wow. Yeah, no, I'm thinking of all of the things at the possibilities at the library. Now I'm wondering, I'm like, well, you say we can broadcast. Now I'm like, can I want to do a rope suspension in the middle of the library now or something.
If you have a rig that will do it, yes. We just lost our big tent. I'm about to replace it because Okinawa has been working on an exhibit for the library and he wanted to come out and do some classes. So we were formulating the tent to go around it with the suspension from a huge tree in the backyard to come through the top of the tent. So we could suspend from a treetop um, in a closed way of doing it. But suspension in the library, one of the kids had one of those, I guess it would be like triangle style rigs
Mm-hmm.
that sit under an 8-foot ceiling. I mean, just. And was doing some really cool suspension in the rare book room. Hey, if your ancestors are enjoying it, who am I to stop you?
You say less. I'm just saying this is like a photo shoot that I have been praying for. Praying for. And as far as Okinawa, and tying at the Carter Johnson, when is this scheduled?
He is working on some serious history because he did his primary studies in Japan
Mhm.
for the craft that is now called shibari. He spent 2 years over there with 2 years over two different times with Japanese rope masters and is obsessed with putting the ancient history together with the older modern history. Evidently, I believe the way he phrased it was the techniques of the four masters who came to the United States and putting this
Mhm.
entire timeline back together. As he's
Mhm.
working on it, of course, the local munches all want to bring him into Thai anyway, which is wonderful. But I am fascinated by the amount of work he's putting in so that ultimately we're looking for a location now, and I think we may do its premiere down in Florida. Probably in about a year of the first of his four phases, which are including photographs of ancient art, some interviews, um, some early modern, if you want to use that phrase, Japanese rope bondage and its tie-in and its lead-ins to its more modern um, offspring and offshoots. So he's working his buns off. I am excited about it. He had joked with me about, Mom, do you have a place where I could do a rope demonstration? And I went, oh, we can make that happen. Oh, can we make that happen? I have a tree and a 15-person tent. Not that there wouldn't be more outside looking in,
Mm,
but enough with three sides so that it's private and the outside world cannot see it.
mm,
But anyone
yep, yep.
who is in the garden and looking in the right direction could.
Mm. Well, I have a very nice swing set style type rig that I actually engineered myself about 5 or 6 or 8 years ago. If you need use of it, I would happily borrow it for an
See,
experience like
and
that.
Dustin, I'm thinking like May, June, before it gets too hot.
Sounds great for me.
I have the kids pitch a couple of the tents in the backyard because it'll be perfectly comfortable for being outside but inside, in the tent
Yep.
but still being able to run around nude.
Mm.
And what happens, happens.
Sounds like
You
a
just stay
great
in the
time.
house and just run all over the house, tying up people in their nude. But you might have more space outside.
I want to take advantage of all of the library space while I'm there. Oh, yep. Yep. I have a feeling that we are going to be seeing each other a few times this year. It sounds like then. It's been too long. So, I think so we got about 23 minutes until we start getting into audience questions. The next question that I have for you is, what do you think the future holds for kink history and its preservation?
I hope, and hope is a word I'm not really happy with, only because it requires outsiders. You can't all do all of hope yourself. You have to have somebody working with you. My hope is that as its value is being discovered by more and more people, it is saved. Now, I'm a paper pusher, I'm old, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for the digital medium. I also have a tremendous amount of fear of the digital medium because of its ability to be wiped out so easily. Even with my young writers, my grandmom's advice, after you've done your composition, but before you do your first edit, print it and do your first edit on paper. Because most word processing programs will save two or maybe three editions, and then they eliminate one to allow you to make the next one. Well, what happens if you've eliminated your first draft? You will not know your original thoughts. So print
Mm.
it. When it comes to the electronics, one of my wonderful youngins, a woman named Katie Diamond, who put out 3 issues of a magazine for women, I asked her why print instead of just digital. And she said, Grandma, what happens if somebody presses a button somewhere because they don't like the word leather or kink or fetish or pervert or whatever? Press one button and it all disappears. Scared the hell out of me.
Mm.
You cannot wipe out the book unless you burn it, and you can't burn them all. But so much gets beautifully created, but also deleted with the digital medium. Beautiful art that these young graphic artists are just kicking out left and right. And when they decide, well, I've improved my technique, I don't like that anymore. First generation of their artwork goes out because, well, nobody's going to like that anymore. Not thinking of the value of the pathway. Those first prints show where you started. It is way too easy to press a button and take it away. That's the part that scares me.
Yeah, honestly, there's a comment from last week that I've just been sitting on a little bit. I interviewed Dr. Tammy Jo Eckhart last week,
Woman.
and phenomenal conversation. We're already discussing bringing her back on later this year. I don't remember exactly how she phrased it, and I'm not very political, and I've actually been reminded recently that I'm fortunate to not have to be very political. And I'm just gonna leave that there, and I'm thankful that someone reminded me that I'm that fortunate, right? But something that Dr. Tammy Jo brought up that really kind of has been, I haven't wanted to chew on it yet, but with current legislation or political agendas, how sex work is being perceived in any kind of adult discussion, and brought it to my attention that, like, even what I'm doing, and I'm like, wait, I'm not doing sex work. Hold on a second. And I'm like,
Mhm.
but I kind of am,
Mhm.
according to a lot of legalities. This is an 18-year-old plus podcast. I have the disclaimer on my website and all of the things. And yeah, I did not think that having a conversation like this could potentially have some legal ramifications for me in the near future. Hopefully not.
Last year, I'm sorry, this is 25, year and a half ago, the library was privileged to take an exhibit to the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. And the exhibit revolved around sex work.
Mm.
Um, yes, brought a lot of books on kink and different things that were happening all over the place. But we did a series of posters because a little bug crawled up my ass and died about perceptions of sex work and the facts of sex work. So
Mm.
we started, I figured, what the hell, I'm old, I don't care. I'm going to piss a few people off. It's my job. So we started with Abraham. When Abraham told Sarai to get thee unto Pharaoh that he might find favor with me, he was hocking his wife. He was selling his
Mm.
wife to Pharaoh for favors, for wheat and prestige and power. Uh, Sex work. We talked about the original definitions of marriage, which are simply a union of a man and woman for political reasons. The politics was about money and lineage.
Mm.
The minute it is to create an heir to cement two families or to secure one fortune, it's no longer love, it's sex work. You are trading something for sex. I don't care how you dress it up, it's sex work. If you are having conversations about things of a sexual nature and it is more than a monologue, it's sex work. We don't think about what sex work really is because the first thought is the prostitute or the wanton woman. Anytime you are trading something for sex, money, power, prestige, um, it's sex work. Now, if you're trading pleasure for pleasure, that's not sex work. That's just fun.
So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm trading pleasure for pleasure. This has been a very pleasurable conversation. I just want that to be on the official record.
So you are encouraging people to think, to exchange ideas about sexuality.
Mm.
So while they are the recipients of your labor, you are in the middle of an action that could be sex work just by having the dialogue.
And it's like I said, I'm very thankful for this person to bring some of this to my attention. I I didn't think of it as something as being fortunate, but they were very honest, and I appreciated how candid they were with me about it. And I guess I've just been living in my own world, and because of all of the things, I've been allowed to because I most of the political things, for my lack of better terminologies, they usually don't apply directly to me. Or I don't think they do because I don't pay attention, which is probably what this person was trying to bring to light, is that I don't pay attention because I think I don't have to, but I probably should.
Actually, now I'm going to play devil's advocate here. If you do, your MO will change. Just think of yourself as a Pied Piper
Mm,
and leading those who have the ability to hear your pipe into a world of places they need to be in. But
mm,
if you actually think about it and start to worry, let other people around you do that. The very nature of what you do will change because your thought, fear, worry, wonder will make you change what you're doing.
mm. Yeah, no, I like to think that due to the nature of this podcast and the conversations that I'm fortunate enough to have, it's helped spurred a lot of thoughts, and it's helped get Dustin out of his little bubble. Because I mean, for most of my adult life, I've been an entrepreneur. I've worked from home long before COVID. I'm an engineer by trade. Leave me alone. Let me make stuff and give me a paycheck at the end of the week. That's all I care about, right? But honestly, and I don't think I've really expressed this on the podcast publicly, my world blew up starting this podcast. I don't There's been a lot of personal challenges for me to even do this. I'm introverted, I'm shy. I don't want to be the center of the attention. I want to be the cause of the ruckus. Um Nonetheless, like, it has challenged a lot of my thoughts and has promoted some new ones. I'm going to own my thoughts. They're my thoughts. But thanks to some of the conversations and learning experiences over the last, like I said, 60 or 70 episodes at this point, I think that it's helping me realize so much more that I couldn't have realized on my own. I think that's kind of a no-brainer, right? But as someone that's lived in my own world, as a master of my own universe, being very vulnerable, it was hard for me to see past that globe, that invisible barrier that I put around me. And while I honestly thought that I was more open-minded, because I took the Harvard bias test, of course, right? I had to take the Harvard bias test. I once again have realized, talking to 60 different individuals from different cultures, from different geographical location, from different financial status. I don't need to give you all of the different variables of humans that I've gotten to talk to. And I've been thankful that plenty of them have challenged my thoughts, provoked my thoughts, such as tonight. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Um, and I think the last question I have for you before we get to audience questions is, what message would you like the audience, ah, some of my words, what message would you like to leave with the listeners about the importance of preserving kink culture?
You are in culture. It begins and ends with your experience and the thousands of other experiences you touch and to touch it. We downplay ourselves because we think of the great world and we consider ourselves a grain of sand in that infinite beach. the entire beach is made of grains of sand. Your importance in this kink world can never and must never be underestimated, because you're not the one who gets to decide what's important. You'll never know what the next generations look back at and go, oh my God, that saved my life.
Mm.
Value the experience, all of them, and be willing to share them, not put them away in a closet. Hold on to them, share them, call the names of the people you love and sing their praises, and allow them to sing yours.
Mm. One of my notes earlier in this conversation was release the value of your story. There is a few stories that I have, depends on who you ask. And I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, but I'm almost surprised that people want to hear my stories, whatever they may be. I have been a public speaker in various aspects to some level for most of my adult life. And my first bout with public speaking, and I've talked a little bit about it on the podcast, is I'm a recovering addict. I got about 19 years clean and sober. And when my aunt is she's got a really fancy title. She's the director for mental health for the health system where I live. And about 8 or 9 years ago, she asked me if I'd come in and talk to her hospital staff about my story. And I'm like, huh? My story? What story are we talking about, Tara? And it was my story of addiction and my battle with it, and more so my overcoming addiction. Prior to 21, there wasn't many weeks I didn't talk to law enforcement. Fast forward 20 years later, I held contracts with law enforcement and helped teach them how to make better decisions, at least from my perspective. I spent 8 years focusing on research and development, focusing on firearms and first aid simulation training, fundamentally trying to teach first responders how to make better decisions. Oh, the irony. Oh, the irony. But
You
I didn't
had that
realize
power if you hadn't walked that road.
exactly. And I didn't realize how valuable that story was until I had other people validate it for me. And I'm like, wait a second, I don't need outside validation inherently. I think all humans kind of want it a little bit. It caters to some of us. But it I guess I didn't realize the value of the stories I have. And the last one I'm gonna like leave just because it's the same is right around the same time there was I I struggle to call him a friend because I wasn't a friend to him, but he sure thought he was a friend to me. And I picked on this kid. I bullied him quite bad in high school. I don't know why he wanted to be my friend. Nonetheless, I probably encouraged this person to use various illegal substances throughout our friendship. Something I don't know if I've publicly admitted on this podcast in 2024 or so, 26. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. I went to prison for drugs. That was part of my road to recovery. Nonetheless, this gentleman reached out to me. I hadn't talked to him for years. And he said, "Can I talk to you about something?" I said, "Sure." And then he just started bawling. I grew up in South Chicago with this guy. We used to beat people up and get beat up, and we're tough he-man, woman hater type of, little rascal type of guys, right?
Reference, yes.
Well, I was just making sure, right? Not trying to speak out of turn. And just breaks out bawling. And he says, "You saved my life." And I said, "What?" And he says, "I don't know how to say it except by being direct." He says, "You're the biggest fuck up I've ever met." And he said, "When you got out and you straightened your life out," he said, "I realized that if you could do it, I can do it." Now this person is a director for an addiction center and has helped save thousands of people. And somehow I helped him, and I don't know how. But once again, it was just sharing my story. I never knew how valuable it was. But here we are. All our stories are valuable. I almost got through this whole episode without, getting too
And I'm
emotional.
supposed to blame this on the onions? No, this is your fault.
Fair. Nonetheless, I think it's time to get into our audience questions. Tonight I'm going to start with what we have in the Zoom chat. Let's see what we have. All right.
Just forgetting there are chats on this thing.
Yes. Well, I'm guessing I know this answer, but I want to hear your answer. Is there a section on sex magic at the Carter Johnson Library?
Good Lord. For one thing, let's start with the work of Raven Caldera, the work of Lee Harrington, the 1934, 4 book on by Falstaff Press on sex magic, as well as all of the other things that have been written that hint on the amazing transformative power of sex, which is its own magic.
Hmm. I'm a fan of Lee Harrington. They injected a really great word into my vocabulary. I already had it, but they put it in a way that I never thought to use it, and that's permission. To give myself permission to have fun, to give myself permission for self-acceptance, and so on and so forth. And as far as Raven, I have not had them on the show yet. When I think of the spirituality that I want to have in my MS relationships, I think of his books. I'm drawing a blank on the one that's coming to mind. It's blue. I remember that, but I can't remember the title exactly, so I'm not going to say it.
Trying to see if I can see it on my personal shelf up in here.
Oh, if I walked away, I could probably go grab it really quick. I'm sure I know exactly where it is on my shelf. But powers and polarity, I believe it is. Or polarities of power or something along that line.
Something like that, yeah. Raven, in terms of conveying the thoughts that go with what it is we do, is incredible. So is Lee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Another name, since we are name dropping when it comes to sex magic, I'm very fortunate to know these people personally, Master Dan and Dawn from Erotic Awakening. Dawn, I remember early when she first met me when I first moved to Columbus, and I would like attend slave meetings as a M type, and she would be like, "Why are you here?" Well, I need to understand the property. If it's okay, I'd like to learn the other side and have a different perspective. But Dawn has just some amazing, amazing thoughts on sacred sexuality. And then the last credit I'd have to do is the person that kicked the woo into Dustin. And that is, I always butcher the name, Dacian Hardy, Radical Ecstasy. It is a very hard paper book to find. I believe they only made a limited amount of copies, and it's, to my knowledge, I bought the second to last printed copy. I paid a ridiculous amount of money for it, but I am thankful
Yeah.
because it literally kicked the woo into me. So as far
I
as
will
sex
thank them
magic goes,
separately.
what was that?
I'll thank them separately
Yeah.
for kicking the woo into you. I will thank them for that.
I I've messaged Dossie to try to get her on the show, or I emailed them, and I only imagine it is hard to get them on the
She's a
show.
lot busier than I am. I salute her for that.
Well, fair enough.
Dossie, a lot of the writers who are going at paces, who we are all in the set that same generation, and man, they're running like crazy. I salute them. I'm old and decrepitated. I'll stay home. They keep going. Dossie, Janet, Hardy, uh, that generation, all of us who came out, crawling out of the same rat holes, but they're still writing. I just collect what they write.
Fair. Yeah, no, actually, I would say I'm friends with Dr. Bob. I hope I can say that after 6 or 7 years. I'm not sure.
Mhm. Good.
But when I spoke to him about it, he was like, "Congratulations, that's a really big accomplishment to get MamaVi." And I was like, "I thought so." I think it's an accomplishment for every one of my guests because I value every one of their times. So, next question from the audience. I'm just gonna go ahead and post it right back in the chat so you can read it because it sounds like they're asking about the name of the publishing company that you were talking about in Germany, I speculate.
Verlog. Verlog Pantheon, I think, is its full name. And I'm about to, can't remember if there's an E on that. Uh, Actually, it's VRLAG.
Hopefully that answers their question.
I think, and I can figure out, nah, this is why God invented cell phones and the great God Google.
Google's got a bias and it's been proven, so I'm not a big fan of Google. We got a comment that says we need some old scrolls for the library. I'm just like imagining like some Dead Sea Scrolls.
Uh, problem is I am spelling this incorrectly. Let's try that one. The problem getting old and decrepitated. Uh, let's try Verlog Prep. Why am I doing this? That's why Google has a listen. Verlag Press, pre-World War II Germany. They're telling me about German U-boats. Not Verilog, Verilog.
Let's see what I can figure out real quick. I got AI on my side.
But there you go. You're lucky I know how to use this thing. When Hitler went to shut down a publishing house, burn down, shut down, destroy. Aside from destroying the Hirschfeld Library, Verlag was the other thing they went searching for because they were determined to shut it down.
Ah, interesting. So, without getting
I will
lost in the
find it at some point and send it to you.
yeah, and I'll post it in the show notes. So something that I find interesting, I don't want to get lost on the tangent. I was listening to Lex Friedman. He's a really popular engineer that has a podcast, and he was talking about some of the flaws in AI. And part of it is, so when I work research and development, me and my business partner, we used to talk about ethical development because me and him single-handedly patented a device that allowed you to use a firearm inside of software that gave somebody a huge tactical advantage. But more so, if me and him didn't have strong ethics or values, whichever word you want to put here, some bad things probably could have happened. Not saying that we're perfect by no means, but how there's small people that influence large people. The people that influence Google, for instance, they influence the entire world. And Lex was saying that there's some fundamental flaws with AI because it's trying to suppress its book burning, essentially. And when I look for your publisher, it says, I'm thinking about the possibility. It's an angelized name form of Verlag and might be referred to a German publisher in 1934. But what it's saying that it's a possibility that it even existed.
Oh, it existed. And
Hmm.
somebody here in the chat, Ray, found it. It's Pantheon Verlag. Most people said Verlag because two
Hmm.
publishers joined together. Most remember Verlag Press. It is Pantheon Verlag. He got it.
Perfect.
Uh,
All right. Next question we have is who's cutting the onions? I'm guessing that's when we were getting a little
you did that.
sentimental. Thank you. There was definitely someone cutting onions.
Somebody, yeah.
All right, we got that. Last question, it looks like, in the Casa Research Group. That's funny that someone posted that because I actually have an interview with them because we're bringing them on the show.
Right. Heck of a team. Heck of a team.
So last question we have in Zoom, and we have a couple on Patreon, is are the Marquis de Sade writings taken seriously in a historical context inside of the kink literature world?
Now, the answer I believe would be yes with a qualifier. Unfortunately, not as many people read Desade's work as they read von Sacher-Masoch. Um,
Hmm.
Desade was the classic libertine and the quintessential for that whole libertine movement of passion in all of its forms for the sake of passion. Some of it was not exactly um, humanistic by today's standards, but he could afford to do what he wanted until, of course, he lost both his money, he lost his money, his freedom, and his patrons.
Hmm.
But Opus Seducum, or 120 Days of Sodom, is looked on as a classic. So is Justine. I think Juliet is better, but not a lot of people read de Sade, which is a shame. Is it taken seriously? Yes, it's especially put into the proper historical context. But I wish more read him.
Hmm.
The greatest challenge for uh, Desaad came up to create a whole new piece of literature, and that was the story of O, because man believed that no woman could write in Desaad's style. And his girlfriend took him up on it and created a new piece of literature that is a modern classic, and that's the story of O. But if we think of the De Sade or von Sacher-Masoch, we're more inclined to think of Venus in furs
Mhm.
than we are to think of Justine or Juliet.
Mm. I'm a little out of my depth on this one, so your answer is great. I
I
mean, I
wish more
have
people read
Marcus de
him.
Sade.
I really do.
I think I bought it simply because my understanding was was the book that started sadism.
So twisted, fuck. But for his era, if you had the money and the power, you could do whatever you wanted.
Sure. I mean, is that much different than this era?
Kinda. We have a few more bumpers in that playpen.
Hmm.
Hi, it's not nice to cut off body parts just because you want to jerk off in the blood.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. Fair.
Jerking off in the blood is fine. There are ways to draw it instead of just dismembering someone.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. I
A
always
few
joke
more bumpers.
I joke I can't get into anything like that because I like repeat business and you only have so many limbs, so I can't really get into it. I'm not into
You
one
see,
night
when it
stands type
was
of thing.
cheap and someone would have sold you a limb for a couple of loaves of bread,
Hmm.
more bumpers in the playpen now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, once again going back to some of the conversation with Dr. Tammy Joe because it was about ancient lessons. Some of the conversation and thoughts that was spurred there. The debauchery that we think we do now, it pales into comparison a couple hundred years ago. Because in your words, the bumpers that are in place, the social niceties or normalness that we've seen. Huh. Uh, I'm guessing they're asking who I'm bringing on from Chorus. Dr. Richard Sprott. And the title is, you guys are going to hear it first here because I haven't actually released this one yet. The title is Flourishing in Fetish, Tashara's Research on Kink and Well-Being. And we are airing March 6th for that episode. So about a month from today.
The
We
work they have done,
have
continue to do, is just astounding.
Mhm.
Just astounding.
The research papers he sent me was very interesting, and I've only scratched the surface, so to say, right? Um, and I'm gonna pause because I don't want to taint the conversation in a month. But some of the research it's gonna be really interesting to have the conversation with Dr. Richard. I'm looking
We'll
forward
be
to it.
eager to hear it. Actually, I'm going to have to tune into that one because all of you together should have some fascinating conversation.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. And actually, something that I've toyed with this year, I don't know exactly how I'm gonna work it because schedules aligning for some of us is really tough. But I wanted to do some like round tables. Like I would like to get like Dr. Sprott and then Dr. Brad. What's Dr. Brad's last name? He runs
Sagarin, BDSM,
Sangria
Sagarin.
Sangra.
Yeah.
I'd like to get like them on a show together, right? Um, oh yeah, no, I have so much ambitions with this podcast. We'll see what I can make happen. Let's
Good.
see. The last questions we have for tonight come from our Patreon. We have two, and I will post them in the chat for everybody to read also. So we have what are the biggest challenges you faced in preserving kink and leather history, and how can we, the community, actively support this work? Thank you. You actually redeemed me because one of the questions I didn't get to. Here's my question. So I'll go ahead and put that in there because I didn't get to it. But how can members of the kink community support or contribute to the Carter Johnson Library?
Some of the biggest, right now, my two biggest challenges. First one is space, i.e., money. When Jill and I started this a little over 2.5 decades ago, it was my obsession. She thought I was crazy. She loved me. She supported it. Because she kept going, you already have Big Brother in Chicago. And I said, this is a different avenue to the same goal. Um, Most of what we do comes out of Jill's and my retirement.
Hmm.
If money were no object, the biggest thing would be more space, a bigger building. Right now, we struggle a lot just to keep the lights on. So far, I haven't really had to delve too far into the personal wallet uh, any more than usual because most of the material I acquire and, the things, a lot of little things that I firmly believe are my particular obsessions that the library itself shouldn't have to pay for. So we use that for the basics like water, electricity, um, basically keeping the lights on so the library is accessible.
Hmm.
Um, Running almost equally with them would be more volunteers who have the time to come in or the ability to help us digitize. Again, let's assume money is no object. Yeah. But my fantasy, other than a much bigger building, is to get this entire collection online.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
my team thinks I've lost my mind. Um, because and they go there are certain levels or I don't know what you call it, levels of patronage or paywalls or whatever the hell it is, but to create a way where it's all accessible. And some of the things that are in the library, the books are important, but the newsletters, it talked about the histories of communities, the newspapers, the programs, which are histories of events, the old bulletin boards of those of us who actually printed them out. Um, those things now, in again hindsight, show the history of communities and the history of how we evolved. And getting that stuff scanned so that it is available and combining other collections, like the archives has some of it scanned. Uh, UC Berkeley, I think, has some scanned to be able to get it to where the collections can talk to each other so that a young scholar could go, I really need the newsletters from Dallas in 1996 because I need to look up certain clubs.
Mhm.
Well, I have the newsletters, but I haven't had the wherewithal in terms of because that's out of my pay grade. That's why I have you kids to put those into um, proper PDF forms and things like that to be able to recreate and download them. Um, that would be the second, would just be the volunteers who could come in and scan.
Mm.
We're working on redoing the website so that I have much more space um, to try and post these things. Now, I leave it to my kids and grandkids for format, but the ability to have someone who understands when I give them a book of newsletters from 1996 or old BBS dialogues that have been downloaded Don't lose it. Don't screw with it. You are dealing with something that is quite literally irreplaceable. Scan it, bring me back the original M1 scan. Keeping one for yourself, major. But being able to get that online is running hand in hand with, will one of you please just win a $50 million lottery, give the old lady 5 million so I can get a new building? Uh, Other than that, money is always important because, like I said, keeping the lights on, it is major. But also, and again, this is my woo side rather than my practical side because I've never been able to raise money for myself. I do it for everybody else. But it's taking whatever the current medium is so that the library is accessible to the future. And in doing so, allowing someone to go, Mom, I just downloaded 3 copies of books that I have permission to download or old magazines. Here is the digital download for you. So we can bring those up as well.
I would love to help with that. I'm from a tech person, the idea, it is a non-trivial amount of time. Like it is a lot of my life now is automations and artificial intelligence to do a lot of busy work for me, and there is not in my head. I mean, from my like where I'm at now the engineer's coming back and it's like, well, maybe I just designed something that flips through the pages, scans it, flips the page, scans, flips the page, scans. Not sure if that's even, but let me
You
spin some
want to
wheels.
see the scanners that Google has? About 8 or 9 years ago, when I was up in Boston and trying to explain to the great God Google that yes, I have books you have never seen, and they're going, can you loan them to us? We guarantee you will get them back with a scan and for your own private collection. It's like, you can scan it. We get to do whatever we want, and you will do it with our permission. They took me through their scanning room. It was every librarian's wet dream.
Oh.
With at the time, I think the scanner alone was about $35,000. The software that went with it could rewrite the debt of a small African country. And their scanners, they would bring the book out, lay it on a book cradle, and the machines going around it would turn the page.
Yep.
So that once it's placed down, no human hands touch it until it's been completely digitized. I watched this, and Dustin, I'm telling you, I had an orgasm watching it happen. And I went, yeah, one day when I grow up, I'll have one of those. Um, it was incredible to watch.
Honestly, I'm thinking like, and I don't want to get lost in tech because I will. I don't think we need a $30,000 scanner. A high quality cell phone nowadays does really good scans. Um, any Samsung or iPhone over the last 5 or so years.
But you have to be attached to it. This thing did
No, I
all of it.
don't. No, I don't.
You can just and it will turn it for you. But that was the thing
Well,
that amazed
no, no, no,
me.
no. So in my head, like that's easy to turn a page. That's easy. That's a Raspberry Pi and a servo or something, right? Or maybe I could get a little bit more creative. I could probably make something to turn a page parts wise for under 20 bucks. And I could probably design time, proof of concept in 2 weeks to a month, I would say at most, probably less because I always under promise and over deliver.
You know I'm getting turned on here, right?
But in my head, like for us to stationary mount a phone right? To put a book in front of it and to make, like I said, a Raspberry Pi that turns a page every 3 seconds doesn't seem that hard. The one thing I'm thinking though is I have to see how my phone scans documents and see, because there's like a sweet spot, so to say, right? Where you got to be perfectly square to get a good scanned document, but if your phone's tilted. But I like challenges and I like tinkering. So
Right now,
we'll
we
see.
use Caesars. We use the big Caesar scanner because it's made specifically for books. Um, Library's PayPal, because somebody asked, is info@leatherlibrary.org at PayPal. So if you want to contribute, I would be incredibly appreciative. But if any of you wins that lottery, we make a great tax deduction, and I already have a design for the villa that I want because it would look like somebody's house, just 40 times larger.
Well, see, I don't even have to develop the page turner. There's already one out there. Easy. Perfect. So, like, not getting ahead of myself, let me spin some wheels and see if it's actually something that possibly is feasible. Um, and the only way we really know is if I make something up and then bring it there and then we test it. But at the end of the day, like, it's still going to be, there's still going to be a lot of busy work for a human, right? You're going to have somebody that's going to have to, set the book there and probably verify randomly that it's still turning the page, it didn't crease a page or something like that. And then obviously change the books. And I can only speculate how many books you have. Like, so that start thinking about, say, 3 seconds a page, so while I may be able to help on some part of this, there's still going to be a lot of manpower. But it could be something where, in the morning, one of the kinklings comes into the library, sets a book down, starts the phone, comes back at lunch, changes the book, starts the phone, then shift two kinkling comes in after work, change the book, and it's just, I mean, like I said, I can only speculate how many books you guys have, but that's a large debt in itself. I mean, if I can make the scanner for you guys, cool. That's great. An old cell phone and some 3D printed parts and
How to make our Caesars even better because that's one of the things that we use. Uh, and it that's the other side of the fantasy. First one is a much bigger building of, and the money to maintain what we've got so far. A bigger building because hi, you're sitting in my workroom and thank God you cannot see the chaos around me. I have 100 and some odd linear feet of shelves in here. I'm double booked. And this is just my workroom. You ought to see what's in the library. And temporarily, while we are doing some expanding, half of that's in storage.
oh
Uh,
geez.
because we are doing some shifting and moving and expanding and so on. And like I said, I could make a great tax deduction for some very rich millionaire
There you
and
go.
give all of the books they could possibly read in the process. I could keep some wealthy man or woman jerking off for a century.
Do you guys have like a Patreon at all?
We're setting one up because for the longest time the kids didn't particularly appreciate Patreon. I'm going, but it's a name everybody knows. But somebody asked something about library merchandise. And one of our web mistresses, who is incredibly creative, asked what I would love to sell. And I said, beyond the usual t shirts and things, hi, I'll take backpacks and duffel bags and sweatshirts and dog tags and so on. So she took the library logo and we change out the heart for different things. Like for one of the library logos, it has a boot in front of it, just to honor
Okay.
my boot blacks. books. For one, it has a doggy bone in front of it to honor my pups. For one, we changed the red heart to the trans flag to honor my trans brethren. For one, the AIDS ribbon is in front of it to remember all of the men and women that I lost. So we modified the logo for all of the people that we and groups we celebrate. All of that is on a website called sucktherainbow.com.
I love it. I am looking for it now, and I'm gonna post it in the chat shortly.
And you go
Fuckthererainbow.com.
through, you will see so many different changes to the library logo. All of them happen in the heart. So all of the groups we celebrate are represented within that logo.
I love it. I love it. Well, we are at our 2-hour mark. I think we're running out of audience questions, but if we give them enough time, they'll ask some more, I'm sure.
At least we didn't bore them to tears.
You know, I'm going to go ahead and be a typical Dustin here for a second and slightly selfish. If you guys didn't get anything from this conversation, that's your loss because I got a lot from it. Now, I hope somebody other than me got something from this conversation, but if I'm just going to be selfish for just a second, it was a wonderful conversation. So, last question I have for you. Uh-oh, you got something?
That thought, honey, could I get you to come in here just one quick second? All right, make it 2 seconds. I lied. Just peek. No, I only need your face. She's tired. I was going to see if I could get the 51-year international Ms. Leather to just poke her head in and go. She's halfway back up the stairs already.
He said, nope, see ya.
You meet her when you come visit.
Oh, I'm already planning on it. After I get off here with you, I genuinely will be looking into what makes sense as far as a weekend in the very, very near future. And then I already wrote down in my notes to pay attention for May and June as far as to see when you guys are having your little event out there.
It's most beautiful at the end of spring.
Oh, I can only imagine. So my last question for you is, where can we find you? Where can we follow you? Where can we support everything that you do?
My social media director, a wonderful woman who is also my girl Friday, named Courtney, um, keeps us active on all of the other social media. I tend to be on Facebook most. One, because it is the easiest one for me to follow. As much as I have a FetLife profile, as funny as this sounds, the white print on the black page gives me headaches. The library has both a group and a page on Facebook, as do most of the annexes. So if you want to know what's going on at Carter Johnson, Atlanta, they have a page, or Carter Johnson, Hampton Roads, or even our Carter Johnson in Costa Rica are putting up a page. So we encourage people to follow along both my personal page and the library page because I'm posting all kinds of weird shit. And the library has a channel on YouTube that is also a lot of fun. The kids threatened to put a GoPro in my left ear or something, and then discovered that if they taught me how to use Zoom and forced me to sit down and open every package that comes into the library of all the stuff that I've ordered, you get to see all of the weird shit that I spend my money on. So they can follow us on YouTube as well. I think Matt said we have to get to like 1,000 subscriptions or something before it gets monetized. I have no idea how that happens. I just learned that I actually thought it was kind of fun to do it.
Well,
So
you won't get
all that.
monetized. If you're not labeled as sex work yet, you will be. So I have a few thousand followers, and Facebook they monetized me once I broke 25,000 followers or so, but then they took it from me. So like the first month they paid me a couple $100. I was like, yeah, cool, wow. And then the next month they're like, you were talking about the BDSM. You violate terms of service, so on and so forth. So this is where I would strongly recommend Patreon. I had a lot of people that we probably both know push me to Patreon because I kind of had mixed feelings on Patreon, but it is a platform that is designed to be sex positive. They have all the financial things in place and so on and so forth because last year the podcast we aired on a platform called Kik, K-I-C-K. And they were like, "Oh, we're better than YouTube, free speech, say whatever you want, just no nudity pretty much," right? Offering great incentivizations for content creators as far as monetization. Well, they monetized me after I got 100 subscribers. They started taking my subscribers' money. Well, their payment processor labeled me as a sex worker. And to my knowledge, that payment processor still has almost a year of my subscribers' money because they would not allow me to appeal it on behalf of my subscribers. So I sent out an email to my subscribers that, hey, just so you're aware, cancel your subscription. I never received $1 from them ever, not once. Like, so
Have
it
something set up through Suck the Rainbow. People want to donate. Um, merch is fun. If for no other reason than I get the vanity of being able to see it in public. Um, a direct gift through PayPal is always fun. We tend to use PayPal only because it's safest.
hmm.
We're smart enough to get it in and then out directly into the bank. Um, and I know my kids are expanding. Mom, we're looking at X, Y, and Z because that's why old people have children.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, hopefully this episode has brought a little bit more exposure to the Carter Johnson Library and the cause. And I imagine that a non-zero sum of people will share your mission and share your vision. I know I do. So with that said, it's time to wrap up. I just want to say, MamaVi, I can't say how much I appreciate your time, your your experience, your commitment to community, your commitment to self, right? Sometimes we forget about ourselves. And I have a feeling you might occasionally. Hold your head high. You've done so much for us. It's time to pass the torch whenever you're ready. Whenever you're ready.
Each year, we have those conversations. And in the meantime, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, all, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Dominance Dialogues. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to subscribe and share. And as always, stay curious, stay intentional, and keep the dialogue going. Until next time, we'll see you. Bye.